Welcome back. Health tracking device company Fitbit made a big splash on Wall Street this past week by offering stock to the public. Investors loved it and ate it up, sending the stock up amidst a revolution in healthcare, technology, and longevity. Earlier, I caught up with the father of longevity, Dr. Craig Venter, who mapped the human genome more than 15 years ago. He says the data that he's been looking at over that 15 years suggests we will be living into our second century in the next 10 years.
We all differ by about 3% in our 6 billion letters of our genetic code, but it's across the population. So we need large numbers of genomes from people across ethnogeographic backgrounds, different diseases, and that's what we're in the process of collecting now. And we're getting their genetic code, and we're measuring all kinds of measurements on their phenotype, their biology, their clinical state, to start to analyze this. And so most of the discoveries that will take place from the human genome will be in the next decade. And we'll have more in the next decade, more discoveries overall than the last 100 years in biology.
What have you learned so far about the human body and about disease? What are the most important discoveries from all of the data that you've collected in these last decade and a half?
Well, I think the biggest changes that we've seen in medicine have been in the most common diseases, heart disease and cancer. Just in the last 2 to 3 years, there's a revolution going on in cancer. If you have cancer, the most important thing you can do is get the genome sequenced of the tumor cells. Some people are just measuring a finite number of genes. We're doing that as well as measuring the entire genome. And they're so-called driver mutations in about a dozen different genes right now, that if you have one of those driver mutations in a certain kind of cancer, it tells the cancer doctor exactly what drug they should use on your tumor. And it's totally beginning to change cancer therapy. But it's, cancer is not easy to lick, and so it's going to be a combination of these new immune therapy approaches with understanding these driver mutations. An example is with lung cancer. Pfizer had a drug they took into phase 3 clinical trials to try and treat lung cancer, and the trial failed miserably. But then it was found retrospectively that one gene called ALK, a translocation or a change in that gene, occurs in about 4% of lung cancer patients. In that 4% of patients, the Pfizer drug works extremely well on over 60% of them to shrink their tumors.
Wow.
So this is what the future of precision medicine is, understanding your specific genome, your specific gene changes, determining which drugs are out there that will likely work on your tumor. 15 years ago, it would have been giving that same drug to everybody that had cancer, whether it worked or not.
Right.
Now we know only 4% would have responded.
Wow. So it's a
very big difference. So it's really getting to the precise medicine that President Obama talked about recently.
You told me that you do believe that there is a chance that in the next 10 years, we will live into our second century. Is that right?
Well, more and more people are living into their second century. But it's from changes across the board. The biggest changes were in infectious disease. In fact, most people still die from pneumonia or some type of infectious disease, but we've had antibiotics, we've had antivirals, we've had increased sanitation, we've been able to do prophylactic treatment for heart disease with statins, et cetera, and all these sort of increase survivability over time. As we take that even further, it will have basic increases in our average lifespan. Our goal is not to increase the number. Our goal at Human Longevity is to have a healthy lifespan. So if you can predict what diseases you're likely to have, and even understanding preventative measures you can take, or driving the pharmaceutical industry in new directions. For example, with Alzheimer's disease, using a combination of MRI imaging and the genetic tests we do with sequencing the genome, we can predict relatively accurately out 20 years maybe before you would have symptoms that you might get dementia.
Such important insights. Craig, great to have you on the show today.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Craig Venter joining us on longevity.